Hello, wrestling fans, and welcome to Step Through the Ropes, Volume 11. From the early to mid 1990s, one of the greatest big men of pro wrestling was Yokozuna. He was born Rodney Anawahi. His father was the brother of Wild Samoans Alpha and Sika, so he was part of a great family as it was. Wrestling family, that is. I understand in some point in the 1980s his career began. He went by the name of Coquina Maximus. He competed in promotions such as, I don't know if it was Championship Wrestling from Florida, or maybe the UWF, which was run by Bill Watts. I'm probably wrong about that one. He eventually wound up in the AWA, managed by Sheikh Adnan Al-Kaisi, who later became General Adnan. And he was credited for putting Greg Gagne out of wrestling, and the reason behind that was I think Greg was told by his doctors that he couldn't wrestle anymore, and if he took like one bad body slam or one bad bump in the ring, that Greg would be unable to stand or walk again. Eventually, he went off to New Japan Pro Wrestling for some international seasoning, and eventually in 1992, he and the Head Shrinkers, Samu and Fatu, his cousins, Fatu later became Rikishi, and my understanding was initially they were going to be like they did like a 6-man tag team match together, but Vince McMahon decided he wanted to push Rodney as a solo wrestler because he already had the Head Shrinkers, who were formerly as a Samoan SWAT team in the late 80s and early 90s, and they were managed by Alpha, the Wild Samoan, Samu's father. So I understand Sergeant Slaughter had the idea of a sumo wrestling character that was given to Yokozuna. Yoko and his manager, the late Mr. Fuji, were very happy with the idea that was pitched to them. And of Yoko, his first appearance on television as Yokozuna was Superstars, which aired on, I believe, October 31st, which was Halloween, 1992. And I forgot the wrestler's name that Yoko dismantled and destroyed in that one. Also, of note, Yoko actually got lucky because he wound up having a match at the 1992 Survivor Series, in a match where he basically committed murder and a half on Virgil. Now, that match was actually replacing the match between the Mountie and the late Davey Boy Smith for the Intercontinental Championship, because my understanding is Davey was fired for failing a drug test, and he ended up dropping the Intercontinental belt to Shawn Michaels on a Saturday Night's Main Event that was taped in late October of that year, and it aired in around mid-November. And the Mountie, I think, was gone by Survivor Series. So Yoko got lucky to be on his first pay-per-view about a month or so after debuting his new character. And also, Fuji ditched his tuxedo hat and cane for a kimono, which, for those who don't know, is a type of robe they wear over in Japan. And Fuji, who was actually born in Hawaii. In 1993, Yokozuna wound up winning the Royal Rumble match, entering the ring 27th, eliminating along the way Tatanka, Carlos Colon, the late Earthquake, John Tenta, Tito Santana, the late Owen Hart, Bob Backlund, and last eliminating the late Macho Man Randy Savage. Yes, that's right. He got rid of 7 guys. Yoko had earned the right to challenge for the World Championship at WrestleMania 9. Along the way, Yoko, I don't know if it was supposed to be a match, he faced Hacksaw Jim Duggan, where Duggan said he could knock Yoko off his feet, and Duggan managed to do that, but Yoko took the salt bucket and threw salt in Duggan's face and gave him multiple banzai drops, including one where Fuji had taken the American flag and buried Duggan underneath, put the American flag over Duggan, and Yoko banzai dropped Duggan flag and American flag and all. I mean, this really put over Yoko as a not only a true force and a threat, and such a monster. And eventually, Duggan did come back. I don't know the reason behind Duggan taking time off for this. Yeah, and then Yoko ended up defeating Bret the Hitman Hart at WrestleMania 9 for the world title, thanks to the late Mr. Fuji throwing salt in Bret's face. But after the match, Hulk Hogan came out and tried to plead the referee what happened. And Fuji, on behalf of Yokozuna, challenged Hogan to a title match right then and there. And Hogan managed to defeat Yokozuna in under a minute to win the world title and walk out of WrestleMania 9 with it. Then from there, Yoko wound up regaining the world title, defeating Hulk Hogan at the first ever King of the Ring 1993 pay-per-view, where he defeated Hogan with his own finisher, the leg drop. And after the match, gave him 2, or was it 3 bonsai drops. Then a challenge was made to all professional American athletes to show up July 4th on the USS Endeavour to see who could body slam Yokozuna. There were many football players, I think a few basketball players were on hand, even a lot of wrestlers too, and eventually it was Lex Luger who showed up, and he ended up body slamming Yokozuna. And also along the way, Yoko had put Crush out of action. Really a lot of stuff I'm really going to probably forget as we go along here. But eventually, Yokozuna faces Lex Luger at SummerSlam 1993. And they really tried so hard getting behind Luger and building him up. And his call to action bus tour, he went all summer long to gain support from the fans. And Luger ended up defeating Yokozuna by countout, even though they had Tatanka and the Steiner brothers come out and celebrate the victory, even though Luger did not win the championship. Then, that November, Yokozuna joined forces with Ludwig Borga, Crush, and Quebecer Jock in a losing effort to Lex Luger, The Undertaker, and the Steiner brothers. Yokozuna and The Undertaker were eliminated. They were both counted out, and that's where Yoko's program with Undertaker got underway. Yet 1994 began. Yoko, with the help of about 9 other wrestlers, defeats The Undertaker in a casket match to retain the World Championship. Then, by virtue of Lex Luger and Bret Hart winning the Royal Rumble, being co-winners of the Royal Rumble match that night, both of them would get a shot at the World Championship. A coin toss took place where Lex Luger won the coin toss, got to face Yokozuna first. Referee was the late Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig, and Yokozuna was declared the winner by disqualification and retained the championship. But then later that night, Yokozuna finally lost the world title to Bret the Hitman Hart, and the match was refereed by the late Roddy Piper. Now, up until that point, Yoko was like the second heel in the history of the WWF to have a long run as world champion. The first was Superstar Billy Graham, who unseated the late Bruno Sammartino in 1977 and had a 9 or 10 month reign until early 1978 when he was defeated by Bob Backlund. Yoko had second run as world champion began at the 1993 at June of 1993 at the first ever King of the Ring pay-per-view, and finally lost the belt at WrestleMania 10 in March of 1994. Now, after WrestleMania 10, Yoko had started working matches with the late John Tenta, Earthquake, who, by the way, they even had where Yoko, I don't know the results of those house show matches, but I know Yoko lost a sumo match to Quake on Monday Night Raw one night. And kind of, I don't know if Yoko's weight was starting to get out of control at this point, or he was packing on the pounds, and I'm not offending the man's memory here. because he, I guess, kind of started doing tag matches mostly from this point on. He teamed up with Crush at the 1994 King of the Ring in a failed effort to win the tag team championship from the Head Shrinkers. Earthquake eventually left the company for the second time. I'm not sure what the reason was because they went on TV to say, oh, Yokozuna squashed Earthquake on a house show somewhere to explain why he was not around. And and then Typhoon came back after a forgetful and infamous and forgetful stint in WCW as the Shockmaster. I called him the Jock Itch Master. And Typhoon and Yoko kind of ended up having a short-lived feud, which it kind of ended when Yoko and Crush defeated Typhoon and Mabel, rest his soul, in a tag team match on an episode of Wrestling Challenge. Surprisingly, Yokozuna was not on SummerSlam '94. A year earlier, he was main eventing with Lex Luger, and this time he wasn't even on the show. Then Yoko ended up facing The Undertaker at Survivor Series '94 in a casket match where The Undertaker was victorious. And I don't know, is this just a point in time where Jim Ross had sent Yokozuna to Duke's medical facility, Duke University medical facility, to get him to lose weight? Because Yoko was not seen again. He made a shocking return at WrestleMania 11 in 1995 as he was the mystery partner of the late Owen Hart. And Owen and Yoko that night defeated the Smoking Guns to become the tag team champions. A month later, at the first ever In Your House pay-per-view, Owen and Yoko beat the Guns in a rematch. Then at the 1995 King of the Ring, Yoko was defeated by lost by countout to Savio Vega in the first round. A month after that, the second In Your House pay-per-view, Yoko and Owen were victorious over the Allied Powers, Lex Luger and the late Davey Boy Smith. SummerSlam '95, Yoko wasn't on the show, but I think it was during that live pay-per-view broadcast they announced that Yoko and Owen would face Shawn Michaels and Big Daddy Cool Diesel in a match where, for the first time, all three championships at the time would be defended in the same match. And in that matchup, Diesel and Shawn were set to face Owen and Yoko with the World, Intercontinental, and Tag belts on the line, but they did this silly angle at the beginning of the show. They said Owen Hart was missing, and interim president, the late Gorilla Monsoon, gave Jim Cornette time and said if you could find a new partner, then he and Yoko will be the tag team champions for one night only. And it ended up being the late Davey Boy Smith, who earlier in the night defeated Bam Bam Bigelow. My goodness, so many wrestlers I mentioned have since died. Diesel and Shawn had their way going, but then Owen Hart suddenly appears, ends up jackknifed by Diesel and pinned. Diesel and Shawn won the tag belts, but then the next day, due to a technicality, and unless I'm mistaken, this was the first ever appearance of Jim Cornette's lawyer, Clarence Mason. Where he convinced Gorilla that the belt should be returned to Owen and the Bulldog. Owen and Yoko, sorry. And they were, but Owen and Yoko on that live Raw the night after losing to Shawn and Diesel, they lose the tag belts to the Smoking Guns. Then Yoko replaced The Undertaker in a match with King Mabel at the In Your House pay-per-view in October of 1995, which ended in a double countout. Yoko, in the process, Yoko and Owen failed to win the tag belts back from the Smoking Guns. Yoko ended up on the first and only wild card Survivor Series elimination matchup as Yoko joined forces with Owen Hart, Dean Douglas, and Razor Ramon in a losing effort to Davey Boy Smith, Ahmed Johnson, Sid, and Shawn Michaels. Then in 1996 arrived. Yokozuna didn't win, I'm sorry. He was in the Royal Rumble match. He entered ninth, eliminated Bob Backlund and King Mabel. Eventually, he and Vader were both eliminated. I'm sorry, Yoko also eliminated one half of the squat team, which was the Headhunters. We know them mostly as the Headhunters. Don't know if those guys are still wrestling. And Yoko and Vader were eliminated simultaneously by Shawn Michaels. And after the match, Vader attacked Yoko out on the floor. And I believe it was the next night on Raw they did a live taping, a live Raw, and also they taped Raw that aired the next few weeks, where eventually, where Yokozuna was booted out of Camp Cornette, and he ended up facing the late Davey Boy Smith one-on-one at the In Your House pay-per-view in Louisville, Kentucky. Yoko was victorious by disqualification because Jim Cornette used the tennis racket, but it had no effect. Vader, who had recently been reinstated from his attack of the late Gorilla Monsoon a month early, he attacks Yoko. He handcuffs Yoko to the rope while Vader, Cornette, and Bulldog beat him down. Then it was originally scheduled to be Yokozuna one-on-one with Vader at WrestleMania 12. I don't know if it was due to Yokozuna's weight gain or continuing to gain weight, but they ended up switching it to a six-man tag team match where Yoko joined forces with Ahmed Johnson and Jake the Snake Roberts to face Vader, Owen, and Davey Boy in a six-man tag where if Yoko's team won, Yoko would get 5 minutes alone with Jim Cornette. Vader, Owen, and Davey Boy were victorious in this matchup. And then they did a taping the next day, the night after WrestleMania 12, and I think it aired a week or two later, where Vader allegedly broke Yokozuna's leg with a Vader bomb off the second rope, and Yokozuna, Yokozuna was I think taken out. He would have a forklift to carry Yokozuna from the ring to the ambulance. My understanding, that angle was done because Yoko was like sent off to weight loss camp or something. Well, obviously sent off to lose some weight. I don't know if he did at the time. And then after Vader was victorious over Razor Ramon at Good Friends, Better Enemies, Michael Hayes, then known as Doc Hendricks, tells Vader and Jim Cornette, you'll be on the Beware of Dog pay-per-view and your opponent will be Yokozuna. And Cornette pagged. He says, "Oh, Yokozuna's hurt. He's not ready." And Hayes says, he says he couldn't take it anymore. Or couldn't wait anymore. I'm not sure what he said. But the match was supposed to happen, but unfortunately, due to the power outage in the arena that night, the match was not aired on pay-per-view. So 2 nights later, at a Superstars taping, that match and 2 other matches from that pay-per-view took place, and Vader defeated Yokozuna to pretty much close the book on that feud. Along the way, Yoko lost a King of the Ring qualifying match to his former partner, Owen Hart. Then Yoko wasn't seen much on TV after that. Yoko lost to Stone Cold Steve Austin on the free-for-all right before SummerSlam 96 due to Yokozuna pulling the top turnbuckle off and getting pinned. The following night, Yoko faced Shawn Michaels, and Jim Cornette claimed Yokozuna was back with Camp Cornette, but that was never proven. And I don't know how often Yoko was seen on TV after that. Yoko was at the Survivor Series 1996. Yoko joined forces with Savio Vega, Flash Funk, who was Too Cold Scorpio, and their mystery partner turned out to be Jimmy Superfly Snuka, rest his soul, as they did battle with Vader, Farouk, the new Razor Ramon, the new Diesel. Again, more deceased wrestlers I mentioned here. That match, the first time ever, a elimination match in Survivor Series history, an elimination match ended with no survivors. They actually first fake Diesel pinned Savio Vega with the jackknife powerbomb. Snuka pinned fake Razor Ramon with the Superfly Splash. But then Diesel hit Snuka with a chair. Savio Vega came back to the ring with a chair, and they all brawled, and the referee declared it a double disqualification. Then Yoko, I don't think was seen much on TV after that. In 1997, there was talk that he had lost weight, but I don't know if that was true or not. And also, I think some state athletic commissions would not allow, deemed Yoko too heavy to wrestle. And also, I don't know if this was true that he did lose weight, but it wasn't enough to appease WWF management and such. Yokozuna eventually passed away in October of 2000 at the young age of 34 years old, and was eventually put into the WWE Hall of Fame. I forgot what year, but he was inducted. It was accepted by his cousin Rikishi. But folks, let me know what you think. Was Yokozuna up there with one of the best big men in pro wrestling? Would things have worked out better if he maintained his weight? Let me know what you think, folks. And I know hope you all come back for volume 12 of Step Through the Ropes.